Welcome to the Adventures Club of Los Angeles. My name is Andrew McGregor, and I have the prodigious honor of serving as first vice president this year. We are an organization of explorers, tinkers, makers, sailors, that kind of thing, anthropologists, veterans, who for the past 100 years or so have gathered almost every Thursday, rain, shine, or war, to disseminate, discuss, glorify, and share the culture of adventure and leaving the beaten path. And in that wonderful vein, I am privileged and honored to welcome to the stage tonight Nyesha Arrington. Nyesha, or is it Chef Nyesha Arrington, like a British knight?
Depends on what room I'm in.
All right, cool. So Nyesha, yeah, you travel the world. You just got back from Morocco. When I kind of study your work and think about you, I'm kind of reminded of this fun side history of the Italian Renaissance, where Michelangelo had his favorite marble quarry, and the Medicis controlled it, and then like all the painters had to find their own ingredients, au naturel, and they had these personal journeys that were, of adventure. They weren't just artists. Do you feel you fit in that mold, or are you more like, I'm looking for the lost treasure of Shangri-La of habaneros kind of thing? And welcome, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. I would say I would dance between both ideologies in tandem, depending on the season of the year. I'm chronically, I think, outside of the box, create my own path and journey person. Having been in fine dining in restaurants for 20 years, and 2 restaurants of my own that were top 100 and highly acclaimed in Los Angeles, cooking in the most elite restaurants and eating at the most elite restaurants in the world. I've really used that as a parameter of thought, and definitely am a color outside the lines person in terms of looking at food through the lens of culture, right? That's really what drives me in my pursuit of like culinary excellence on my terms.
And can you give us a brief biographical background and kind of how that affected your deep curiosity of culture and seeking those lenses, right? Because people could have taken many paths, but you had this uniquely exquisite one, right?
Sure. I mean, I think everyone has a story to tell. Mine is one of them. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, so I think that in itself, there's a very robust terroir for me to draw from here. I think, coming from a sort of biracial background, African American and Korean, my grandfather was a chef in the Korean War and met my grandmother there. They came to Los Angeles and started their family. And I remember going to my grandmother's house, I'd taste flavors that I never would experience really, in elementary school or at my friends' houses or even my parents' house where I lived. But when I'd go to grandma's house, it was like stepping into another world. And so I think at 4 and 5 years old, that left a taste of palate development that became insatiable for me throughout my adolescent stages, and then parlaying that into a career, and now kind of going back and saying I can still be in the constant pursuit of these like mind-blowing experiences.
Did the curiosity of travel come before the, I guess, pursuit of excellence, if not mastery, of the culinary world?
Well, I think the pursuit of travel, for me, I really truly value the idea that life and time is our non-renewable resource. So for me, every day of living on this planet, I really want to make it worthwhile. So I think, I try to expound my knowledge as much as I can. And I think being able to see different cultures and how they operate and how people live in different parts of the world, not just here in Los Angeles where I was born, is really the thirst that I have to see, go to Morocco and see this and experience this sort of time capsule. Like when I went there, it was like a period of time that is untouched, so it's cool and rerouting for me to know that places like that exist while simultaneously, I'm in Venice Beach, like working out. Like it really grounds me as a human.
So you would describe travel as a form of time travel?
Yeah, 100%. And I think recipes are the literature behind that, right? Because ultimately, those recipes, they transcend throughout time, right? So it's a craft that is forever.
What's the most ancient recipe you've come across, and where was it?
Most ancient recipe, I would say when I went to Belize, I cooked with this Garifuna woman, and we used no conventional tools, no heavy machinery, just sticks and mortar and pestle and clay and wood and fire and the elements of the earth. And the recipes were so simple and so rooted in tradition and story. I would say that was probably the most ancient recipe that I had, tangibly come in contact with.
Who are the Garifuna?
Garifuna is a tribe that lives on Belize, and there's 5 cultures that live there. The Minotek, it's like almost like the Amish. They live with no electricity, but even more reverted. And Latin culture, and the Garifuna people, and I don't remember the others, but those were the predominant cultures on the island of Belize.
Were they converted to Christianity, or was it a kind of pre-Christian recipe?
I'm not too sure, actually. Yeah.
And you briefly touched on story and recipe. That I think, particularly in contemporary American society, it's thought of as a technocrats thing of or kind of an engineering chemistry thing. But can you touch on culture and story and this transmission idea, both in yourself and then as you've seen it in that particular instance?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, culinary and the idea of recipes and sharing that, it comes from a very humble place. And chefs are, I would say, a certain breed of people. We are nurturers. We are analytical thinkers. We're creatives. Someone like myself, I call my style of cooking progressive California cuisine. So it's food that's very globally inspired, but it's rooted in the seasons, right? There's a nucleus to it in that if Mother Nature is saying, these sweet peas and this fava bean are delicious, that's most likely what I'm going to create my dish out of, and then with an inspiration from my travels. So my dishes, they hit a few points, nostalgia, what is in season and what is that global influence. So that's sort of the way that I've sort of crafted to cook. I came up in French fine dining, very gnarly, yelly, pan-throwing, hectic kitchens. And, there was a part of me in my 20s and early 2000s that was driven towards that for some odd reason. I think that was an era and time where it was the harder you worked, and that was kind of how you cut your teeth, and I was up for the challenge every day. And I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gone through that experience. And so, I think for me, the kitchen was written in the stars in my experience, because I have the tools for it. When I was a kid, I played team sports. I did martial arts. I was exposed to very diverse foods. So I think all of those, that recipe in a human, sum to me that I would have been nothing else. I'm living my dreams ultimately. So having those life experiences early on, and then now being able to craft my own vision, is it is a vulnerable place to be, because it's if there's a school of fish going one way, I can see my style of who I am is I'm with it, but I'm on the outside, kind of going against the stream, for whatever reason. But I think it's an art, it's a creation, and when it can be rooted in something that you want to create for the future, it's just like watering the soil, and planting a seed. So, I'm in constant pursuit of that. The way that I cook is not necessarily just in the 4 walls of a restaurant. It's more immersive, spices and ingredient and product driven, and to evoke emotion in people, right? That's always the ultimate goal.
Is that a kind of almost like you have this synthesis of selfhood between your own cultures? You're violating the conventional geography of a kitchen to bring the whole world in, and is it kind of reflective of that process?
I would say so. I would 100% say so. And I think if I were to put, a label on it, my style of cooking could be like Afro-Korean cuisine, But it's interesting, I'm classically French trained. I've traveled the world, and I've sort of created this tapestry of all of those influences, So I think for me, in trying to understand who I am as an individual, when you come up with a multi-race family, it's it's, you know, you have so many influences, so it's exciting. And I think I would say that experience has translated into the way that I cook today.
Cool. Yeah, before we go on, can you give us kind of a conventional narrative? You went from having pans thrown at you with French people to your own restaurant, to not even just a restaurant, like 2 of them have been on Gold's top 100 of amazing places to go before, you know, life gets snuffed out. Could you kind of discuss it that way?
Sure. Sort of the culinary journey lived thus far.
Yeah.
I think, you know, how do I say? I am a very chronic, out-of-the-box thinker. I don't love labels. I love to be malleable and with the energy of what I want to create and what I want to feel and what I want the people to feel in my food. So, you know, the interesting journey to that North Star of an idea took some failure, you know, if you want to say that term. It took some data collecting, you know, of life. And I would say just these last 2 years of being able to travel a lot more, you know, 2019, I was asked to cook in one of the most elite cooking competitions in the world. It's essentially like the World Cup of cooking. It's called the Bocuse d'Or. And, you know, I was the first female to ever of color to ever do it, you know, and it was a very amazing feat to do. But I feel like for me, at cooking at that level where precision is you're breaking down a grid system of seconds. You know, it's like every second you know what your partner's doing, what you're doing, and it's literally on a spreadsheet, and you cook through this time grid 25 times. And so to be able to cook at that level was amazing, and a closure of a fine dining chapter, and lean into, you know, being able to travel, you know, in that year that I did that. And I also closed my restaurant without a plan. That's when I went to Belize and Hong Kong and Israel and New Zealand and France. And that was really like the first taste of like being able to bop around the globe that much in 1 year. And it lit my soul on fire. I was like, this speaks to me. This is why I'm on the planet, is to connect with human beings through my lens of cooking.
So when you roll up in a country, how do you, what's your first step? Like, how does that come to you?
I observe, you know, I observe the people. I always approach with respect. And I want, honestly, I like to blend in with the people. You know, I wouldn't say I'm observing like through a glass wall. You know, I want to be in and with, and I 9.9 times out of 10 am accepted, because I think people, they just want to feel seen and heard, and, you know, and I think that's what I most love about the experience, about seeing different cultures.
Yeah, I guess just more granularly, how did you get from airport to an amazing tribe in Belize? So you're like, all right, I'm here, or like?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I literally closed the doors to my restaurant, and 3 days later, this small crew of 4 people said, hey, we've been watching you, and we'd love to shoot a documentary of you hanging out in Belize and meeting the people, and we have these 6 islands mapped out, and we're going to take this tiny plane and fly all over and take 3 people, and that's what we did. We went on the most amazing adventure ever. It was like so epic. Yeah, it was amazing. Like, I remember walking to my hotel one night, and we were on this like amazing compound, and they were like, oh, there was a jaguar spotting, so like you might want to be careful tonight. I'm like, oh, that's like real shit, you know? Yeah. So yeah, what else can I tell you?
Yeah, and then from Belize, how did you pick Hong Kong? And like,
well, I did a. This was like right before the lockdown stuff. I did a dinner there, and I called it sort of this like elevated California diner. It was like I wanted to bring California cuisine to Hong Kong, and, you know, for expats, for people of China, and do a dinner that was very reflective of California, but with nuances of Asian influence. And so I went there to cook, and I did 2 nights of a dinner of a 6-course meal. That was like more my fine dining hat of a dinner experience.
And then from Hong Kong, is that how you ended up with the Maori, or?
Yeah, that was later in the year. So there I cooked an epic dinner with 3 other chefs. One was from Tasmania, 3 female chefs. One was from Tasmania, one was from South Africa, she was Maori, and the 4 of us, we cooked an amazing epic meal together, and essentially dug a hole in the ground and put a goat in the ground, and did the traditional Maori, the hongi, where you touch noses. And
what is the hongi? I know not of this magic.
Traditional New Zealand greeting. It's like you basically touch noses, and it's a symbol of peace, right, and longevity in life, and essentially breaking down barriers of any barrier.
And what did you learn from that experience that you integrate into your culinary practice now?
What did I learn from that experience? I think lessons in vulnerability. I think in America, that's kind of not a thing that we generally do. But I was super open to it, and honoring the culture, I would say, and not putting up so much of a barrier between the experience to be had.
Yeah, and you're touching on something very profound and needed, I think, because that's the conventional critique of anthropology, is that by studying a culture, you change it. But also kind of globalization in general, that, as commerce goes abroad, it just destroys all this wisdom and all these cultures. But you've kind of cultivated a personal attitude that kind of lets you cut through that and restore those connections. Is that an accurate way of saying it?
It is accurate.
Yeah.
I would say, 2019 was a big renaissance of thought of how it is that I chef. I really leaned into the idea that I am an unconventional chef. No, I don't have a restaurant. I don't go to a place. People don't patron my restaurant and get this write up in the LA Times or New York Times, and now I'm a chef. I chef in a way that suits me in the experience that I want to give and share. So I think being able to go to these different places and take and share different elements is what ultimately makes up my style of cuisine.
Do you approach a new culture like, I'm here with my wisdom, or is it like, show me what you got, kids?
No, quite the opposite. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a blank slate. I have zero ego. No matter the best chefs that I've ever worked for in the world, most Michelin stars, it doesn't matter. I go in with a blank slate and a blank canvas every time. Yeah.
And you spoke a little bit about these ancient stories and kind of cultural transmission. Have you ever served meals to someone in a disparate culture and they have a memory or they have a revelation from this flavor? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think what I've learned, every culture sort of has their bread. It's all different. Is it a rich dough? Is it a lean dough? Is it flat? Is it a boule? Is it a loaf? There's bread really connects us, I think, as a human race. Bread is life, and I would say that's been very interesting to sort of see. I think my very, very, very first experience away was when I was living on the island of St. Kitts in the Virgin Islands. And, that was I would say that was one of the more challenging experiences for me, because I was actually a chef in a restaurant, and I had to find new ways to inspire a team, right? And in the Virgin Islands, when they say island time's a thing, it is a real thing, It is truly a real thing. So it's trying to find ways to inspire. And I think that was ultimately showing people how they can grow food, the products they were coming in very inconsistent. Drivers would be like, oh, it's raining today, we're not delivering. And it's I have a wedding party for 20 people. We need this product. So I started growing a lot of my stuff, and I think that was exciting to get the team involved, to see how far they can take their own food, So that was, I think, the cool exchange.
Is it possible to kind of get the buy local thing? Because we have this kind of, I don't know, royal way of living now where you can get non-frozen ribs from New Zealand sheep, and, the world is at our fingertips. So how do you kind of insert your way of being into this global economic system that, just devours that?
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. I would say, on a micro level, my neighbor and I, we have a small garden that we eat out of every day. So I take that same idea. Like, for example, when I was in Morocco, I traveled with 12 people. I was hosting the culinary tour there, so taking them to the markets, crafting the experiences. And throughout every place that we went, I gathered, I gathered spices and honey and citrus and olive oil. And by the time, we were 3/4 of the way through the trip, I put everyone in teams of 3 and 4, and we cooked a meal together. So I think that was one of the most impeccable memories I've had of my entire lifetime, was watching these people who aren't chefs connect with each other and be so stoked about the food, and being able to eat the journey lived thus far, the cinnamon from over here, or this olive oil from this amazing artisan, and to be able to put the Moroccan ingredients to work, but me creating the menu, it was kind of this global mashup.
Yeah, sorry, who was the team? You're in Morocco and you have a team. Did you collect them, or did they come with you?
No, I individually collect them. Yeah. They come with me. We're starting a new society. So the trip I went, I met this gentleman who's a great friend of mine, Luis, and he has an organization called Modern Adventure. And so him and I curated this trip together to go to Morocco, and people purchased the ticket to come with us on this culinary adventure.
And they knew that was the narrative of the journey, or did
Correct.
you surprise them?
No, the surprise was really the chef at the end, Najat. She is her restaurant is it is in Fez, and at the end of it, she cooked an amazing meal for all of us. And her and I had been talking through WhatsApp for years, and we just happened to connect at the end of the trip, which was really lovely.
Do you think it's possible to share authentic cultural knowledge through food?
1000%. I think in a digital age, that's really the only way is through the food, because it tells you exactly what the earth is giving from a product standpoint at that time, the emotions of the people, what is the vessel they're cooking in. Recipes are truly a cultural time capsule.
I guess, can you elaborate more on that sensitivity? Because, I've been to Italy and I've been to New Jersey, and they both have Italian food, but,
Sure. Well, it tells you the migration of a people, right? So if you're in Italy, it's for sure going to taste a lot different than I won't even say watered down version, because it's a migration of people who are trying to preserve their heritage over time, right? With not the same ingredients, not those same San Marzano tomatoes that are sweeter and have more access to sunlight than they do imported from Peru, and they're trying to make this same pomodoro sauce or what have you. It's not going to taste the same, definitely. But I think it's the ultimate goal of the people is trying to preserve those stories through the cuisine, no matter where they are. It's the diaspora, right?
And can you describe that process a little bit? How is culture maintained through cooking in a diaspora?
Yeah, I think it's through the storytelling, right? It's the nonas in the kitchen showing the younger generation how to make that pasta, and I don't think that always translates through digital, right? If we can scroll through Instagram and see a pretty photo of pasta, you can read through a recipe, but are you really truly going to understand the wheat? Is the wheat harder today? What is the humidity in the air? What is the surface that I'm rolling this pasta dough out on? Like the grandmothers, the people, or whoever, the grandfathers that are the holders of these creations, when you can teach that to someone and they teach it to the next generation, I think that is really the preservation of the families.
And then what have you come to learn about your own family's histories that you didn't before you started this cooking journey?
Well, we are all very much food people. No matter the cultural background. My dad's side's from Mississippi, born and raised in Los Angeles. I'm third generation Angelino. But I would say, my dad's mom, she was a house cook for the Doheny family and helped raise them. And, My grandfather was a cook in the Korean War. Both my parents cooked. I was the kid who ran home from elementary school to watch, Julia Child and Graham Kerr and Essence of Emerald. It was a legacy that has been created thus far, So I think for me, it was always destined that I'd be into food. Yeah.
So you're fulfilling the prophecy, if you will?
Essentially, totally. I remember the first day I sat in culinary school, and Chef Chapman, amazing human, salt of the earth guy, and he was so passionate about stocks and sauces, and which made me very passionate about stocks and sauces. And I remember the first day I sat front and center, front row, middle seat in class, and as soon as he started speaking, it was like hearing the most beautiful love song. I was like, I'm 100% where I am supposed to be in my life. And I never looked up until, 5 years ago, maybe. I was just on the constant pursuit of excellence, of trying to hone my craft and work for the best people, While those kitchens were crazy and nuts, I value and cherish my upbringing, and so just want to share that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. No, you and Anthony Bourdain also commented on the value of abuse in the kitchen. In terms of your own martial arts practices, do you see a correlation now when you look back of
100%?
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I liken the idea of a beautifully executed night service to almost being like a Jedi. I mean, you have to have the most heightened senses. For me, when I was running these kitchens, the viscosity of the blender, I without looking will know that they're blending, the basil puree or whatever. So it's almost like the most beautiful song, all these different sounds and temperatures and lighting. It's all part of the show. But when I read Kitchen Confidential for the first time, it was the first book that I read cover to cover and then back again. I just felt like I couldn't devour the words quick enough. And it was when I was reading that book, it was almost like I'd lived the life in a previous life. When he spoke, he was so articulate and beautiful writer. But through the artist brain, he really conveyed the message. And it was for me it's like a beautiful work of art. When you set up your station and nothing else mattered, you just are a mechanic, like a technician. You just execute, and it's a beautiful symphony. Being able to run a meat station in a 2-star Michelin restaurant, and command a kitchen and run the line and do it with joy, is beautiful.
How do you know when you've hit that home run and honored the culture you're trying to honor? Do you just see it in the dish, or do you just do the little?
Yeah, for me, in my experience, I know because my heart always skips a beat when I know that I'm on to something that's amazing. I feel it, I feel the energy of it, and until I feel that, it's generally trial and error, and I go down a rabbit hole and I'm like, oh, it doesn't work. It's like a beautiful equation, when I try to work out these dishes, and then when it all hits, I know it,
So you don't even need the person's response. You just kind of know that you're like a sculptor who's I've made the thing.
Yes, and I think, ultimately, we're entertainers. Chefs want to put on a show, and I think we share that. The people, the artisans, the bakers, the makers, we're sharing a craft, and I don't know that it's always for approval. Sometimes the joy is in the making, Yeah.
Yeah. Earlier, you spoke of chefs being a kind of person, and I find this kind of fascinating because every culture you go to, are you we're the chefs, we're the bringer of joy and the cares of alchemy and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Finding. Vonnegut had this great idea of I think crevasse is how you pronounce it, but this global tribe of like-minded people.
Wow.
Can you talk about that a little bit, in terms of your own journeys?
I would love to. Yeah, I think cooking is a very humble act of kindness. It's you're nurturing another person, and you're also making an intangible thought tangible for someone else to enjoy and live in the soul. It's not an artwork. You don't see it. It lives in the mind. You remember that experience. or work accolade or celebration, oh, I had that amazing, baba ganoush, and then you remember everything else after that, and you kind of get transported into those moments. I think, those artisans and makers and creators have a certain, like, je ne sais quoi, they're just connected, by frequency, I think, and so I think you can always pick those sort of people out in a crowd.
But how?
We find each other. I think it's through, emotion, body language, energy, which is, I can only speak for myself. That's how I know. And I think also just to be able to celebrate food. I think that's really how we find each other. Yeah.
And then what's your next journey going to be? Or what do you want to, I guess, what question do you want to explore next? And where are you going to explore
That's
it?
a great question. What question do I want to explore next? I think finding comfortability in that it's okay to not be conventional, I'm next going to spend 2 weeks in Bali working with some chefs there and doing some collaborations. And so I'll be there in 2 weeks, for 2 weeks, if not longer. And so I hope to learn a lot. I think, people that have been on my life journey thus far seem to think that place is really going to resonate with me. And I agree. So, who knows if I'll come back. But, yeah, Bali's next. And then I go to London for 2 months in September.
Why London, of all the culinary places?
Well, it'll be my first time in the UK, but we'll be shooting the season 2 of a show that I'm on that I am mentor and judge that's on Fox called Next Level Chef.
Do you want to talk about your awesome media empire career thing, or?
I don't know. No, I mean,
Empire's the wrong word, but I've been
on a few
body of work.
cooking shows, and Top Chef was the first that I competed on. That was my first glimpse into TV world, which was very challenging, to say the least, because you're a restaurant chef. You value these things of no food waste and and all the things, and then it's you go on TV and it's a different world. You have cameras on you and lights, and those things aren't necessarily valued. You're just trying to make the best dish as quick as possible. But the Next Level Chef show is killing it. It's been amazing. It's been very well received. The young lady that I mentored won the show, so I'm very proud of her. She is killing the game. She's in Hawaii right now, I think. We're actually doing a collaboration dinner on Sunday in Culver City. But yeah, TV is fun. I really enjoy it. It's a good way for me to connect with a lot of people through media.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've kind of, I don't know, there's the idea of the fourth wall, right? So what do you hope people get from your TV shows?
Well, I mean, what is currently the feedback is that people say that they appreciate the authenticity. I truly try to be present and welcome everyone with open eyes, fresh eyes, and so I think that is what I want to share when I am on TV, is not a character. So it seems to be resonating with people, and I enjoy that.
Do you think the TV program sort of occurred had you not gone on this journey of traveling and finding your kindred spirits, and if you had just been I'm going to be the elite chef, and why or why not?
Yeah, no, I think, I'm pretty a results-driven person. I really try to do everything my best, and I think ultimately, there's different ways to dictate success, but I think this is part of the plan that I charted a long time ago, and it's really crazy because I remember specifically one day working in this restaurant and I was scrubbing the table down and I was I'm willing to do this for a while, but I don't want to do it forever. And I remember having this conversation with myself. I was it's probably 2004 or 5. And I was I need to pick someone that is who's out there doing it, and it was Gordon. Gordon had just the most Michelin stars, he was doing the TV and all the things, and I was wow, that's super cool, to be able to be a chef and do TV. And then, 15 years later, I'm working next to him, and that every day I tell you that I was on that set with him was like, I was so excited to like get out of bed. He's so professional, impeccable mind, very kind, very, very high functioning, like amazing person. And to be on a set led by a chef was, it was like my media world and my kitchen world coming together. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you able to how did you meet him? How did you kind of fulfill that other prophecy of your prophecy?
Yeah. So he came to an event, probably 2014, I think was the first year I met him. And we shook hands, and his, we just said hi, and his people were all around him and stuff. And then I went on his show, Master Chef, in like late 2019 maybe, or 2020. Yeah, right after 2020. And he was like, basically I made this dish, and he was like, "Who are you?" Like, and shook my hand, and he was like, "My people are going to reach out to you." And I thought, great, like this is amazing, but I'm never going to see you again. And they did. And it was such an amazing moment, Andrew, because it was like, for me, it was very palpable. Him watching me cook, I felt like it was like he can relate and see those 20 years of arduous being in the trenches, like, 'cause he lived the same life. He's worked for those same chefs. Marco Pierre White's arguably one of the best chefs ever to live. And, he worked for him, and the chef I worked for him. And so, I think there was these small touch points that he saw in my cooking and efficiency that just resonated with him. I could feel his energy when I was like making this dish. And then so he asked maybe, 5 months later if I wanted to be on this new show. Yeah.
It's just like one spoonful, and it was, like ambrosia emerged.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
incredible.
It was the ambrosia.
In terms of like acquired taste and cultivating those tastes, I remember a few years ago there was that "what color is this dress" thing online, and
Yes.
Then it came out that like there's a certain tribe in I think East Africa that like doesn't see blue like
Interesting.
Western people do.
Interesting.
Their blue is kind of a variant of their green, and it was like, interesting. But in terms of you and these flavors from different cultures, like, did you and he have the same palate, or do our palates change? Has your palate changed the more cultures you've encountered?
Yes.
Can you kind of describe the existential subjectivity of cultural and culinary transmission?
Yes. I would say, yes, we do have a similar palate. I also think just a similar approach to excellence, and hard work. I think that's, if nothing else, I have work ethic, and I think everything that has come into my life has been based in that. And I think that has been rooted in, similar to him, playing team sports and doing martial arts and having that discipline at an early age. I don't know if this story will translate, but there was a moment in the finale where we were standing in this huge glass countertop, and it was impeccable. It was like super shiny, not a spot on it. And we were tasting the dishes, 3 judges, me, Gordon, Richard, and this like speck of sauce like drops right in between Gordon and I, kind of off my fork. And we both look at it at the same time and both do the same exact motion to get it off. And it was just this like insignificant but significant moment where it was just like, I was like, I see you, like we see the same things. And it was just, for me, he's kind of like my I've had many mentors in my life, but I consider him to be like a third mentor, to kind of show me the ropes. And he's been all over the world. He's traveled. His show Uncharted is phenomenal.
Can you give a bit of his background? We just spoke of him, but it might not be no knowledge to the whole audience.
Yeah, Gordon Ramsay, he's got a lot of Michelin-starred restaurants across the globe. He's worked for a chef called Marco Pierre White and has had a lot of success in restaurants of his own, and his autobiography is amazing. What else can I say? He's the GOAT. He's the best. Like, he's one of the greatest to ever do it. I think he has this really tough exterior persona and character on television, but he's just a really awesome dude. Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So do you have a different palate than others? I mean, you have the same one as him.
Well, I would say, do I have a different palate? Yeah, I mean, I would say I experience food through, texture and temperature and acid and heat and, seasonality. But I would say the way that I cook is definitely of a mindset of, I like to draw and paint and sculpt. So like of a true artist, some people are chefs, and not just chefs, but are chefs. And operate more from an analytical standpoint. I went on tour with Stevie Wonder, and that was a very amazing first exercise in trying to convey that flavor of a dish without being able to see it. I thought, wow, what an interesting challenge this is going to be to cook for a man who cannot see the food. So I relied on different elements like texture and temperature and things like that, viscosity. So I think that was really the catalyst in sort of thinking and framing my dishes around that.
That's so fascinating. Can
It
we
really
talk about the Stevie Wonder thing? What happened? How did?
Yeah, absolutely. He was impeccable. I would say, they really call him the eighth wonder of the world for a reason. The conversation.
Boy, you were like called up like Stevie needs a chef, or what was it?
Literally, legitimately. And
Yeah.
I hung up on the lady 3 times before she and I actually connected. But and I thought she was not, legit. But he was on the Key of Life tour, and it was impeccable, man. I mean, I was in his entourage. It was me, Stevie, his daughter, and like his security, and like he's so down to earth, super cool, like just a amazing brain, and would just like I remember we were in the car once, we just made up a song, and like. That was amazing. And just being able to sit with him like this and have a conversation was impeccable.
What new flavors did you bring to Stevie's life?
Well, he was eating vegan at the time. So one was this squash that Jonathan Gold wrote about, and he said it looked like a still life Dutch painting when he ate this dish. But it's rooted in the idea of sustainability, in that it was a whole squash, baby farmer's market squash, and I scoop the seeds out and I roast the seeds and steam it, and I make this sort of tapioca risotto, and so I made this dish for him, and he was mind-blowing for him. He loved it, and that was one of the more transformative dishes. Yes.
Have you made it again, or is it lost to Stevie?
No,
Like,
I have.
I burned the recipe now.
No, I have made it many times. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
How does one get you to make it again?
You have to come to one of my dinners.
All right, cool.
Yes.
So going forward, like 5 years from now, where do you hope to go? What do you hope to learn? And what
Honestly,
other things do you want to
Andrew,
create?
I would say the biggest thing, cooking for the top 1%ers, being able to travel where I have, land, sea, all the places I've been. I think for me, I would love to transition into like more of like a philanthropy style work, and really just try to help people and bring joy as much as I can. I think, not everyone has as much opportunity as we have here in the States, and being able to see that firsthand, I think that would be a super cool thing to help fulfill out and round out my life, is to help bring passion and joy to other people.
Joy through food and the arts, or okay.
Yeah, and
what does that look
access.
like? What's a pilot program?
Access to food. I think skills, knowledge. I think people ultimately want to feel like they're a part of something, and learn and just have exposure to things. So, that's sort of a macro way to look at it. I think over time, I'll dissect and distill that down and really find a niche. But I think it would be to help and bring joy to people through food and cooking.
So existentially, you're kind of leaving the idea of a chef and becoming a global citizen or something like that?
No, I think I'll always be a chef. I mean, that is my root system. There's no doubt. I identify as a chef. Like, that is a big part of who I am. But I think there's different branches, and I think that would be a big part of it that I'd love to parlay my life into in my golden years. Yeah.
This is a me curiosity, but did Stevie see color when he ate your dish, or was there a kind of cross sensory experience of any sort?
That's a good question. He enjoyed it. He said they were delicious. I wonder if he did see color. I hope he did. Yeah.
Have you seen other kind of moments like that of borderline transcendent, but like an unexpected bridge to a different realm of sensory or memory or something like that?
Yeah, I think, I'm a big soup person. I love to make dishes that are stews and soups and braises. And I think, it's the small moments, like when my neighbor's not feeling well and I make her chicken soup, I think that can be transcending, and feel warm, like you have that warm hug. So, I live for the small moments like that and try to really evoke that in people as much as possible.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think we can open up to the audience. Do you have any other comments or things you wanted to add?
No, I'm just lovely conversation. Happy to be here. This is such a cool organization. I really value travel and value connection. So
Cool.
Thank you.
Hopefully the club's community will be able to give you more magic. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
To the noble audience. Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll get you a mic.
All right.
Kevin Martin, 1226. First of all, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
This was amazing.
Wow.
For someone who loves to cook, I love how you said that it's not so much the pleasure of the audience, but it's a chef will take on his own. He'll expand his own horizons because he wants to do it, and I think that really coincides with being an artist. It's like you might not understand it, but I'm doing it because what I see and what I feel that I can expand on, and so I love that. My question is, what was your favorite culinary experience abroad?
Favorite culinary experience abroad? There's been so many. I'm like, is it one that I was eating, or was it one that I was cooking?
One that you were cooking.
Most likely, I would say when I was hanging out with the family up in Morocco in the Atlas Mountains, because there was nothing around. And then when we walked up and saw what they'd built with their own two hands, this family, literally stoves out of clay and burning the wood and basically a hut, like growing the chickens, growing the produce, working with nothing and being so sustainable, wasting nothing. That was one of the most impactful experiences that I've had. It really rooted me, because I've worked in kitchens where we would legitimately fly in aluminum foil from Italy because it was like the best, right? These 3-star elite Michelin kitchens where you have 3 people on one station, like the jokes, of the tiny dish where it's like, oh, it's perfect. Like I lived that for so long, and it's like, yes, it is amazing. Yes, of course, it is no downplaying of that. But to take all of the cold steel and metal and all of that out and just get to the elements was like so rooting for me, to see both sides of the spectrum.
Can I just say that with all your experience and your education and all that, you remain humble. And I think that is so key to creating, to expanding who you are.
Yeah.
And your profession. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you saying that.
So from your travels, what knowledge towards culinary arts did you find to be totally unexpected or like totally fascinating and bizarre?
Well, I would say, what is fascinating to me is the amount of like not real food that we eat here in the States. Like, when we go to other places in the world, like there's not a lot of preservatives and fillers, and it's just the product and the person making it, and it's a street vendor or a stall or a bed, like a milk crate that you're sitting on. It's like there's not a lot of like all of the fluff, and I really respect and appreciate that, the use of chemicals and things that we have here laden in our food and water. It's challenging to get around sometimes and trust the sources, if we're not truly going to the farmers markets or getting these products ourselves. Like, I think more and more we're seeing, those commodity ways of having conventional food put on our tables is challenging, but you see it in the other places in the world. Yes, they're like not as like, I don't know. That was the biggest thing for me, just being able to walk the streets and see the food that's just honest,
As a fellow Angelino, where would you go for a midnight snack tonight around the neighborhood?
Here?
Yeah.
Wow, great question. Where would I go? Well, I don't know if it's super close, but there's a place called Tito's Tacos that's pretty delish. Classic.
Lance Miller, number 1222. As human beings, we have so much in common, but we have a tendency to focus on the differences. And there's certain universal mediums. I think music is one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think sports is one. I think what you bring to the table is food is one of the universal mediums that bring people together. Was there a time that you had, let's just say, people of conflict, and because of the food you put together, that everybody came together on a humanitarian basis and it resolved issues? They actually found a common space to stand and appreciate each other. With the experiences you've had, I'm just wondering if something like that had occurred.
It's so funny that you say that. I always thought that would be the best idea for a show. It's to find two people that are generally not going to enjoy a meal together and enjoy a meal and just break down all the walls and barriers. I would say for us, in the kitchen and my behind the stove days, it's family meal, to be able to stop down and, kitchens are tough places, and so when we would stop down at 4 o'clock or whatever it is, nothing matters. It's just family meal. And so, I think there's kind of a micro-macro thing going there, but I think that would be such an impeccable idea for a television show. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Dylan, and if you ever want to include moose, I know a guy.
Wow.
His
Love
name
moose.
is Dylan.
See what I did there?
So my grandmother grew up in the Great Depression in a very poor Midwest community. And she always described well into her old age in the 2000s and 2010s that for her cooking was a pinch of X, a handful of Y.
Yes.
Whereas in a lot of cooking, in my experience, and I'm not a chef, is a tablespoon of X, a cup of Y. How do you, in your travels, translate that? I don't want to use the word anarchic because I feel like that's pejorative, but that more flowing, open relationship with food and ingredients, and then translating it to the high class, high effort food that you put together, while also kind of retaining that bodily connection with the food that comes with the pinch and the handful.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think to be transparent, I'm looking for that cadence now, right? Because I've experienced both sides at the most elite 3-star Michelin, white tablecloth, fine dining. I've lived that Nyesha more than I have the Explorer Nyesha. So, I'm finding that in tandem of living the experience, right? So for me, it's truly about the ingredients being at the forefront of the plate and that allowing to tell its own story above, what kind of $75 plate it's on or what utensils it's on. It's the ingredients are the medium of the expression, right? That's the most important thing. It's kind of been the lens so far. Mm-hmm.
In terms of dessert culture, which culture or part of the world gained your favor?
Interesting question.
For desserts, did you say?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite desserts is a budino from Italy. I just love that sort of butterscotchy flavor. I think every culture has their style of desserts. I don't know that I can lean towards one specific place. I mean, France and Japan, they are the ones that do everything, like, very robust. So I'd say from like a technical standpoint, from like a true formula of a recipe, France, they do a very good job.
Vienna.
100%, 100%. But, flavors, then, once you know the formulas, you can implement flavors to that and adapt to that from around wherever you are.
Next question comes from the YouTube chat. It's from David Hayen. If you were doing a dinner tonight in LA, what would be on your menu?
Interesting. Where are we? Spring, heading into summer. I think summer's late June, 20-something. Well, right now, we just started getting cherries. So those are impeccable. Soft shell crabs are killer. Corn is coming into season. So most likely I would use something with summer squash, corn. I'm actually doing a dish this weekend with Indian fry bread with those elements, and then puffed wild rice, kind of the play on the sister ingredients. Yeah, I'd probably do that. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much.
How does one get to go to one of your dinners?
To the mic.
Huh?
Do talk to the mic so the world can hear it, so to speak.
How does one get to go to one of your dinners?
Wonderful question. How does one get to come to one of my dinners? Well, I post them on all of my social media outlets, and I also post them to my website, which is my first and last name, NyeshaArrington.com.
And through NyeshaArrington.com, all your social media can be found?
Correct.
Cool. And you have a book or something coming out, or,
I'm working on it.
I kid. She wouldn't do that. Okay.
So another question, this is Chuck. So all of us have done travels, and part of the travel, because I go looking for exotic music, but then we have to exist and we eat. So I mean, it's been all the way from the deep Amazon dead rats to spectacular meals in Thailand and other places. Sometimes you eat just to survive, and other times you really savor it. One thing I found, for example, in Peru was the cuy, the guinea pig.
Yes, I ate it.
Okay, so when you come across these things, these strange critters or things that are being used in meals, have you created your own dishes using them?
Yeah, I definitely partake. I think, who's to say not to, enjoy a different ingredient and a new frame of mindset, because one thing that's, revered in one place could be trashed to another, and it's just perspective. But I always try to challenge myself when I go to these places to think outside the box.
I really appreciated all the stories you have from around the world, and that you can bring them here, and how much energy they've given you in your cooking, and all these stories it really enriched your life as well.
Thank you.
And you mentioned that you kind of show other people Californian food, and I'm curious for you what that means.
Yeah, wonderful question. So California cuisine for me is food that is very seasonally driven. One thing we do here very well is we play off of savory and sweet elements together on one plate, and also celebrate the vegetable and the fruit, right? Like, animal protein is not always center of the plate, I feel like, in California cuisine. And so I think it's really about, for example, like I do dishes that like sweet potato grits, or roasted corn aioli, and using vegetable as bases as opposed to just eggs or things that are like very conventional. I try to think about ways to add vegetables to dishes. I think that's really what is indicative of California cuisine.
So one of my favorite food memories is being a really broke grad student in Santiago, Chile on an internship and living off of 1 luca empanadas sold off of the side of the street. And I think that's a really strong feeling for me, not only because of like the memory and the nostalgia, but also them legitimately being delicious. What is like the experience that you've had with, for lack of a better word, street food or that kind of almost like casual food setting, and has that like informed any of your interests or relationships with food while being abroad?
Yeah, you know, for me, I always try to hit like places, you know, and it's very similar to my style. Like, I've learned that, you know, I don't love the repetition. I don't want to cook the same style and the same thing every day or even a variation of it. You know, one week I might want to make, you know, dollar tacos or a version of that, and the next week I'll cook foie gras with the most beautiful, you know, huckleberry sauce. Like, so I think, you know, there's beauty in both. You know, I think you could really taste a people in the street food, you know. When you go to these sort of elevated fine dinings places, you know, there's an experience to be had there as well, but generally it is a version of the root system of the culture and cuisine, you know.
You know, I think most of us, like, you know, single guy, works all day long, then it comes time to eat. What am I going to throw together so I get back to work?
Yeah.
And I can see that there's many other options than what I think, you know, because I go to Trader Joe's, get the rice and a little bit of thing of the soup, and then that's it. And it's not a great variation. So it would be nice to have, I don't know, some kind of a show or something that catered to the people that just don't have a heck of a lot of time or don't want to take the time, but to create something interesting and varied and healthy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, food as fuel and nourishment and deliciousness. I hear you, man. Like, I find myself asking myself that same question every night, even as a chef. You know, I'm not always cooking these elaborate dinners. You know, there's 5 other days in a week where I just want to go eat and have fuel and go to bed and not feel terrible, you know. So, you know, I definitely have noted that. And, you know, I probably will put out some programming that kind of helps, you know, dishes like that for people. Doesn't always have to be super fancy.
Kevin Martin again. You mentioned that you like to mix it up. Is there, in your environment, in your profession, is there a lot of chefs that get into a restaurant and can't do that? They get stuck with a menu, and they want to expand. They want to be the artist, but they're limited to that.
For sure, the way that I chef is different from most. I haven't really seen a lot of people approach this idea of this hybrid, you know, way of looking at food. Generally, you know, I can't speak for a lot of chefs because a lot of it's like cerebral, the way that they approach their dishes. But generally, it's going to be centralized around one ideology of cooking, you know, Italian or French or, you know, and then maybe a nuance, or it's like California French, you know, where it's a little bit lighter and things like that. But the way that I cook is truly based off of like what my journey has been. So I'd say the way that I cook is super like niche.
This next question comes from the YouTube chat again. It's from David Hayen. What is the hardest lesson you've had to learn in your travels?
Well, what's the hardest lesson? I think, I think it's important to stay calm when you're traveling. I don't know if that's a hard lesson, but I think that's really important to have foresight, right, and not be reactionary. You have to really be proactive in your thinking and your mindset when you're traveling. I would say that's really important. When I was coming back from Morocco, someone's luggage got put with my stuff, and so when I pulled my bags to like walk away and go to the airport, there was an extra bag there, and like it was a big deal. Like security came over, they're like, "Why is this bag here?" I'm like, "I have no idea whose bag that is." So they like took my passport. It was a whole thing, and so I think purely by remaining calm and speaking, you know, into this man's eyes. I was like, we're going to fix this. Like, and because it escalated very quickly. It was diffused, and I didn't miss my flight. But yeah, I would say, I don't know. Those are basically my words on that. But yeah.
I have one more question. So the whole kind of Yelpization Michelin star system, we've discussed your art, right? Does that kind of create a fetishization around people seeking these, I don't know, accolades, if you will, or like tokens in the world when you've created these amazing cross-cultural, cross-generational experiences? Or is it good because then you're like, hey, I'm Michelin starred and I get reviewed for that, almost like I won a Grammy versus like all the great folk music around the world, or you know, things like that. What's your take on those?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, it's interesting, and that's something I have to always ask myself. I'm like, I need to make sure that I'm not just, you know, or anyone that we're just chasing these accolades. You know, I think that's why I kind of broke off, and I'm just kind of making it up as I go, but doing my life. You know, living with intention. And I think, yeah, it's hard when you're in your like crafting of your life, you know, maybe your early 20s, 30s, it's like, you know, you're kind of chasing after those things, you know, because not maybe for yourself, I can't speak for everyone, I would just say for me, you know, I think it's hard because society wants to put you in a box and label you and validate you in a certain way, and, you know, and so if you can find that way to validate yourself, I think that's really important. But yeah, there's lots of, you know, there's so many awards out there to win, you know. Yeah.
Does it diminish what you're trying to do because it's award-centric? That's a more concise way to put it.
Yeah. No, I think it's a different lens. I think to be rewarded for excellence, there's some beauty in that. You know, if someone's doing a good job and, you know, your colleagues see that and put you up for award and people recognize you, I think that there's value in that. You know, it feels good. But I don't think that is for everyone, you know. Yeah, I think it's a kind of two-sided coin.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm just so happy a tire company brought us so much deliciousness. All right, well, thank you again for coming. If you're out there in the interwebs, please go to her website, check out her social media. Hopefully you'll be blessed to enjoy some of her food. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel and explore other talks. We have one just about every week. And thank you all, and take care out there.